Hello, everyone, and welcome to a mid-afternoon special interest story with my special guest, Jeffrey Deskovic. And welcome, Jeffrey. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. Well, I have to say, I saw an interview with you with Susan Centenbrino the other day, and it was fascinating. I listened to every minute of it, and I wanted to bring your story to light. So a little bit about Jeffrey. Jeffrey, or Jeff, I can, if I may.
Yeah, please. I
Yes,
prefer it that
yes,
way. Yes.
right, yes. So Jeff, uh, Jeff and I talked a little bit about this, but Jeff has had one heck of a story. He literally was convicted of murder and rape at the age of 16, and well, 17, I should say. He was convicted, and 16 years later, after a quite a trial of ups and downs and political ramification, just watching the politics of it all unfold. I think that's what I want to talk about. But you were finally exonerated, and so I would love for you to maybe just start. Tell me a little bit about your story. You originally are from. This was in Peak Scale. What was it?
Big skill.
Peak Scale. Thank you, Peak Scale, New York, and you were a young man attending school. And as I understand it, you had you go ahead. Why don't you tell me the story about when all of this happened and this young lady was murdered in your school?
Yeah. It was Peekskill, New York. It was a suburbs. It was a middle class neighborhood. It was ethnically diverse, and I was 16 years old at the time. She was raped and murdered in November 1989. I was arrested for the crime January 27th, 1990. So I originally got on the police radar because in school I was quiet and to myself. I didn't participate in a lot of organized sports. So that was in contrast to my life after school in the apartment complex where I grew up at, where I was kind of the life of the party, and whatever I would suggest would be what we would do. We'd play basketball, we're going to do Monopoly, we're going to play video games. Ride bikes, a whole host of activities. But in school, those kids were a little bit older than me, so I was not into what they were into. I wasn't into drinking, parties, chasing girls, playing organized sports. So I didn't fit in with them. So my main point is that my not fitting in was uh, a reason how I got on a police radar, because the police interviewed a lot of students from the school, and some of them told the police they might want to speak to me. So that was how I got on their radar. A follow-up factor was that I was a sensitive teenager, and this was my first brush with death, and I had an emotional reaction to that. And the police thought it was suspicious that I would have an emotional reaction to, somebody that I really barely knew. I mean, she was in two of my classes, a freshman, one as a sophomore. I knew her name, she knew mine. That was the extent of it. We really weren't even on a high-buy basis. And the reinforcing factor is that they got a psychological profile, which purported to have the psychological characteristics of the actual perpetrator, and I had the misfortune of matching that. So it was a type of reinforcing factor.
So basically, the police were doing some investigation, and what I'm hearing you say is that they had some kind of psychological profile. You picked that out, and in some ways, it was a little bit of kind of almost bullying a little bit, because like everybody said, oh, this guy doesn't fit in. Why don't you go? He's he's kind of an outcast a little bit. So let's go talk to him first. So tell me a little bit. Tell a little bit about the story when the police first came to talk to you. What was that like for you? As a 16-year-old young man.
Sure. So initially, they intercepted me on my way to the high school. It was pretty. I lived across the street from the high school, so it wasn't that hard to figure out which route that I would likely take. So, they the police exited an unmarked car, and they called my name, and they told me they wanted me to come to the police station and speak with them. They wanted me to be helpful to them, and I told them, well, I didn't know anything about the crime and I didn't see how I could be helpful, but they insisted anyway that I could be helpful, and eventually they persuaded me to go with them to the police station. So my So I went down to the police station, and what happened from there was the conversation took on the dynamic both then and in the 6 weeks after that, that they would talk to me as a suspect, and then I would become frightened to want to get away from them, and then they would change it up to Jeff as this junior detective helper theme. So before I was a teenager, I wanted to be a cop when I grew up. So them phrasing it that way made me susceptible to that deception along with my age, 16. I came from a single parent household. My father was never involved in my life in any aspect. And that also intersected with the good cop, bad cop technique, where one officer was more aggressive, the other one pretends to be my friend. I began to look up to the officer pretending to be my friend as like a father figure. So that happened for the next 6 weeks. And eventually they got me to agree to take a polygraph test. So the next day, rather than go to school, I went to the police station. My mother and grandmother thought I was in school. They drove me 40 minutes away by car to the town of Brewster, which is in Putnam County. It's like across county lines from Peekskill and
Is
Westchester.
it 40 miles or 40 minutes?
40 minutes away by
40
car.
minutes. So your mom, everybody thought you were in school. You had no idea. And they stopped you and they asked you to go, with them. And so they took you to a place that you really had never been before, but you trusted them because they were policemen.
Yeah, that's correct. But I just want to make clear that the trip across county was after the first initial interaction with them and after the 6 weeks. So they tricked me into taking the polygraph test by telling me that there was some new information in the file they wanted to share with me. But before they could, I had to pass this polygraph. So they drove me across county lines. That meant I wasn't able to leave on my own. I had no idea of where I was. They gave me a 4-page brochure which explained how the polygraph worked, but it had a lot of big words in it which I didn't understand. But then I thought, well, I'm there to help the police, so what does it matter? Let's just get on with it. From there, they put me in a small room, and they gave me countless cups of coffee. The polygraphist himself was a Putnam County Sheriff's investigator, Daniel Stevens, who was dressed like a civilian. He never identified himself as a cop. He never read me my rights. Then he attached me to the machine, and then he launched into his third-degree tactics. So he invaded my personal space. He raised his voice at me. He kept asking me the same questions over and over again, and he kept that up for 6.5 to 7 hours. Towards the end, he said, "What do you mean you didn't do it? You just told me through the test result that you did. We just want you to verbally confirm it." And that really shot my fear through the roof. And then the cop who had been pretending to be my friend, he came in the room and told me that the other officers were going to harm me, but that he'd been holding them off, but could not do so any longer, that I had to help myself. Then he added if I did as I wanted, they'd stop what they're doing. I could go home afterwards, that I was not going to be arrested. So being young, naive, frightened, 16 years old, not thinking about the long term, I was just concerned with my safety in the moment. I was in fear of my life. The fact that I didn't know where I was and that nobody else knew where I was either loomed very large in my mind. I was emotionally and psychologically overwhelmed. And then there was this false promise in the threat. So I took the out which he offered, and I made up a story based on the information which he gave me in the course of the interrogation and that I had learned in the 6 weeks run up to it. By the time everything was said and done, I was collapsed on the floor in a fetal position, crying uncontrollably. And obviously, I was arrested. I was charged with a murder and rape.
Did they ever? Okay, so before you there was a lot to unpack there. Before you did the polygraph test.
Polygraph. Mm-hmm.
Right. Before you did that, they never indicated to you that you were a suspect. They never read you your rights. They just kind of said, "Oh, come on in here, take this test," but never read you your Miranda rights. Is that correct?
Yeah. When I got in the cop car at the Peekskill police station, they put me in the car with the cop I'd been looking up to as a father figure. He read me the rights, but I didn't understand them. And I was 16. And further, I mean, this whole charade where they're pretending that I'm this junior detective helper, that further clouded what the meaning of the Miranda warnings were. And then from there, they drove me to Brewster. But after that, the polygraphist himself never read me my rights after that.
Okay. Right. And so, as far as you are concerned, possibly can't be in there, but you're thinking you're a junior cop, you're going on this ride with the cops, you're cool, here you go, you
Right.
get to get out of school. Now you're going to go check out this polygraph, and they tell you, the same thing you've heard, on TV, 100 times, your Miranda rights. So wasn't no big deal. You didn't maybe realize that they were reading them to you, is the way I'm kind of assuming that.
Well, I knew he read it to me, but after he read it
Oh,
to me, I knew he was reading them to me, but right after he reads them, before he reads them and after he reads them, he's like almost apologetic to me that he has to read them.
oh, okay.
So I had no idea of what, and again, I didn't look at 16. Whenever they got to the part, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law, my mind went to like civil court and what I saw on TV, and I'm thinking, court, what are you talking about? What court? We're not going to court.
Right, right, right. And so here you are. You're doing this polygraph test. They keep you there for 6-7 hours. Do they provide you any food or water
No,
or nothing?
no,
Right.
no, no. Other
Okay.
than before the polygraph, they gave me like countless cups of coffee to get me nervous, but beyond that, they
Oh,
did not. They did not. Yeah, but beyond that, they did not give me any food or water. No, they did not. I finally was given something to eat after they had coerced a false confession out of me. That's when I got something to eat, which was in the
okay.
evening, not
So
before that.
so you had the good cop there and the bad cop and the polygraph guy. They were
Right.
all
Plus,
there.
yes. Plus the lieutenant. But we were all in this office. But then the polygraphist put me in a room by himself with just him and I, and the other cops were in another
Okay.
room. And
Okay.
I didn't realize at the time, but they were listening to everything. But
Right, right, right. So I have to wonder, like, why do you think? I mean, I don't know. In hindsight, why do you think they would have done this, like, to you? I mean, do you have?
I think that they just wanted to give the impression that they had solved the case, that they closed the case.
Okay, so there was a lot of pressure in the community.
There was a lot of
Obviously,
public, yeah,
beautiful young lady, died. So they kind of and had died, and they were trying to figure it out. You fit the profile, so they kind of played a game with you, and so they told you all along, kind of, okay, this is what we found, and that is what we found, and find out a little bit more because you were being detective. So they kind of planted a little
yes,
bit of that information
yes, they
into
did
your head.
exactly. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yes, that's exactly. You got it.
Okay. All right. And so now you've got all of this information that you really didn't know, but now you do know.
Now they're gonna turn it around on me. Now they're gonna turn it around on me and pretend, oh, he knew things the killer wouldn't know. Yeah, dummy, because you gave me all the details. That's why. But they
Yeah.
didn't present it like that in court.
Right.
So I want to point out that the interrogation wasn't videotaped. It wasn't audio taped. There was no signed confession. It was just the cop's word for it. So when they came to court, they left the threat and false promise out of their testimony.
So yeah, because they said that if you confessed, you can go home.
Right. Yes, and they also told me that I was not going to be arrested.
And then ultimately you were arrested. I can only imagine what that was like. So what happened then? So you get done with you're crying in the fetal position, 16 years old. Then what happens after that?
Yeah. So I mean, well, the good cop, I mean, starts like petting my head, and this lieutenant bursts through the door and is yelling. He says, I have to hear everything you just said. You have to repeat it. I have to hear it. We can be here all night if you want to be. And also, so I had to repeat the story. And ultimately, and yeah, and that's what I look like with the mugshot. And ultimately, I was brought to the police station and brought to the county jail. I got bailed out after about 35 days. The DNA test result came in from the FBI lab, which showed the semen found in the victim didn't match me. But then that's when the
Can you
prosecutor.
wait, back that up. Back that up. Don't. So you just said, so you went back to the police station, but then then they did a DNA test on you that.
Well, they had taken a sample from me before the day of the coerced false confession. It's just that the results hadn't come in yet. So the
Okay.
results came in after the confession, but before the trial.
Oh, okay. All right. But they arrested you without DNA.
That's correct.
They arrested you based upon a polygraph test.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And we're polygraphs. So this, by the way, this happened in November 15th, 1989, was when the 15-year-old victim went out after school in Peekskill, New York to take pictures of a photography class. She never returned home. Her naked body was found by police dogs the morning of November 17th, 1989. Her clothes and cassette player were recovered from the vicinity, and she appeared to have been raped, beaten, and strangled. So that was the crime. But then, then you confessed, and then tell me a little bit about. So then, how many months passed between? You said 6 months.
Between what?
Between the time she died and they did the polygraph. Or 6
Yeah,
weeks?
well, yeah. Well, it was about 6 weeks. About 6 weeks, approximately 6 weeks.
Okay, so about 6 weeks, and then so now you go back. They get the DNA test, but it's negative. But they still proceed with the court case.
Yes.
And okay, were you able to go? Did you go back to school? Did you have to go?
No, they wouldn't allow me to go back to school until the case was finished. You know, there was a lot of prejudicial pretrial publicity. So I mean, the whole city of Peekskill hated me. Everybody presumed that I was guilty. Especially given that there was a news report of a confession.
Right. Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine the horror. Like here you are, a young innocent man, and I have to tell you, I look at this and I think about the politics of today, and how many times we're hearing, I do praise the cops, right? In a lot of ways, we need them and everything like that. But when you hear stories like this, it's why we need people like you and your organization, by the way, which I do want to plug. As you can tell, I told you this is about his triumph, and just so you know, I'm going to give you a little bit about the happy ending right now, so that you can start looking at that right now. It's the Deskovic Foundation, and you can go to deskovic.org and take a look at that. And there's also patreon.com/Deskovic, where you can literally donate to the cause and to help others be free. But I want to continue with on the story here. So you go and you have the you go to court. And just tell me a little bit about the attorney and how that whole thing, and were you assigned an attorney, and what did that look like?
Yeah, I was given a public defender. So, but in terms of the DNA not matching me, when that happened, the prosecutor got the medical examiner to commit fraud and falsely claim that he forgot to document medical evidence that he said showed the victim had been promiscuous, which is what opened the door for the prosecutor to argue, well, that's why the DNA doesn't match me, but yet I'm still guilty. And then he took it a step further and mentioned another person by name that he claimed had slept with the victim, but he never had that person testify. He never had a DNA test performed. He just made the unsupported argument to the jury. My public defender essentially didn't defend me. He never called my alibi witness. He never explained to the jury the significance of the DNA not matching me. He never cross-examined this medical examiner. He never explained to the jury. He never used the DNA to argue that that proved the confession was coerced and false. And he would not allow me to testify. I mean, it was a confession case. You have to answer that confession. You have to explain it. You have to disprove it and bring everything together in your closing argument. But he didn't do that. Sometimes he argued to the jury the confession never happened. At other times, he argued that it happened, but it was false. At other times, he argued that it happened, but it was coerced. So by taking this scattershot approach in front of the jury, he had to have been left with no credibility at all. he should have never represented me in the first place because of a conflict of interest. So this other youth that the prosecutor was falsely saying had slept with the victim was represented by another member of that public defender's office. And that conflict prevented the defense from calling him as a witness and from the defense for asking him for a DNA sample. And when you add it all up together, I mean, I was wrongfully convicted of a murder and rape and given a 15 to life sentence, which I was sent to a men's maximum security prison to serve.
And so you were, so you were tried as an adult, as I recall, correct? So
Yeah,
you were
correct.
And so now you had to go into prison as a young man, other, men, grown men.
Yes.
How were you treated in the prison?
Yeah, well, it was overall, I mean, it was very dangerous in the prison to begin with. I mean, I'm 17 years old. These are, a lot of people are guilty of serious violent crimes there. And there was a lot of stabbings or cuttings and other violence that didn't have weapons. There was gangs as well. But that was in general. But in terms of me personally in that environment, I mean, at times I was beat up. I mean, there was vigilante mentality where people have been convicted of sex offenses, and one time I nearly lost my life. So there was that. The food was terrible. I mean, sometimes it wasn't fully cooked. Other times it was burned. So then they had a system of maintaining order in the prison known as keep lock, which they involved a variety of sanctions being imposed on the prisoners. So they would keep you in the cell 23 hours a day. Out of the 24, they would send you less food. Sometimes the food would be 3 or 4 days old. You could not go to the store when you were on that status. You couldn't use the phone. You could take 2 showers 1 week and 3 the next, rather than every day as the rest of the population. So when I would try to defend myself and do the best that I could, the prison officials considered that I was fighting, so I was subjected to those sanctions.
I just want to show this picture really quick because when I see this picture you sent me, and I want to share my screen here. This picture is a picture of a young man. And tell us about this picture right here.
So this picture was taken after the jury had sent a note out saying that they had reached a verdict, but prior to the verdict being taken, prior to the verdict being read. And the photographer started snapping pictures of me in the courtroom. And, the lady in the white is my aunt, and she was trying to protect me from the photographs. And the lady next to me was my mother with the black hair. And the other people in the back were news people.
They must have been devastated. And you're praying there.
I'm praying that I would be found not guilty.
And when you got that guilty, what was the feeling? How did you feel at that time?
Well, I felt like, did I just hear that right? Did I miss the word not? Because up until that point in time, I thought that only guilty people were convicted. But they said what they did, and I was taken into custody. And I was kind of like, in a state of shock. I mean, it was really surreal to me.
It makes me so sad to hear this because, you're a young man, you're innocent of a crime, and basically you're set up. And to me, it just looked like it was just a notch in a prosecutor's belt. It was nothing. And the cops, they looked the other way in this case. So tell me about tell me about your quest to get out. And so you're in prison right now. You're with men that are violent. You were hurt, you were beaten up, you were frightened for your life. But I would imagine you probably tried to stay by yourself, as much as you can. But,
right.
But did you have any other, confidants or friends or, that were there or that helped you and guide you or anything like that?
Yeah, well, there were a few old timers that gave me certain prison survival tips and encouraged me to go to school and to go to the law library and learn the law. And there was another there was another prisoner there also who was innocent, and we used to get together every 6 weeks, and we would half the conversation would be about trying to keep each other going morale wise, and the other half we would brainstorm about what the next move was to make. Eventually, I mean, after I was exonerated, after 16 years through the DNA testing, and he was proven innocent also 2 years after me. So it wasn't just that he was claiming to be innocent. He actually was innocent.
So again, like I saw, like one of the people said, this is happening probably more than we can handle, but God knows,
Well, I
And
want to comment on that. I mean, per the National Registry of Exonerations, which catalogs exonerations across the country just from 1989 forward, there have been 2,775 exonerations. 2,775 exonerations. So no, my case is not real. It does happen far more than what we think. I mean, 19 people that I did time with were exonerated either before me or after me. So I think that the wrongful conviction rate is 15 to 20%. Nobody can know the exact amount. You can only count the exonerations, not the wrongful convictions. But there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, that supports my conclusion. I mean, 19 people that I did time with were exonerated either before me or after me.
19, and that's just in that one county.
Well,
Right.
not in the one county, but in that one state, in New York. Just in the prisons, that I was in, I crossed paths with, 19 other people that were exonerated before me, either before me or after me. Some of them were exonerated after me.
Wow. And so you have to try. So who did you reach out to? So you studied law, and
Yep.
and you are now
An attorney.
There
Yes.
you go. There you are.
Yeah, I am now an attorney. Yes, and I am I'm the founder of the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, which we'll get to in a minute. But we've been able to free 10 wrongfully convicted people, and we've been able to help pass 3 laws that did in collaboration with a bigger coalition group, which we're part of, and I'm an advisory board member of. We've been able to pass an additional 4 laws as well.
Right.
So I wrote. So I lost 7 appeals. And then
7?
I lost 7 appeals. I did say that, yes.
Wow.
I did lose 7 appeals, and then when your appeals are over, which they were for me after 7, the only way back into the courthouse is if they changed the law, or if you can find some new evidence that probably would have led to a different outcome. So because I didn't have any money to hire a lawyer or an investigator, I began this letter writing campaign. And I wrote letters for 4 years trying to find an investigator or an attorney to take my case for free. So one of the letters that I wrote to a book author in care of the publishing company, but somebody at the publishing company instead sent the letter to an investigator named Claudia Whitman. And she believed in me, and she suggested I write the Innocence Project, and she lobbied them, and she got other respected legal entities to lobby them. And then I also got lucky that one of the intake workers, Maggie Taylor, that she presented my case 3 times to the Innocence Project before they agreed to take it. They said no twice before that. So getting their representation was the first key step. Second thing is that former Westchester District Attorney Janine Pirro, who does a lot of commentary on television, she left office. She became the DA after I was convicted, but before my first appeal was decided. So she fought all 7 of my appeals. She blocked me from getting DNA testing several times, and she left office. So that was the second key. And the
Wait
third.
a minute. So our Judge Janine, which a lot of us, know, like, and trust, you're saying Judge Janine Pirro was the district attorney at the time, and she blocked all 7 of your appeals. What were the bases?
Yes.
What was she basing that on? Because did you, wait a minute, let's go back. Did you have because where you just had the DNA still, the old DNA, what were you basing the appeals on?
Sure. So sure. Yeah, and again, to clarify, so Janine Pirro was not the district attorney when I was convicted, but she did become the district attorney before the first appeal was decided. So it was her office fighting me. So the appeal was based on, number one, I'm innocent. Okay, the DNA proves that. So my lawyer argued that there was legally insufficient evidence, that their prosecution hadn't proven guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, that the verdict was against the weight of the evidence. Another issue was that my Fifth Amendment rights had been violated by the way I'd been questioned. And another issue was the judge erred in allowing this polygraphist to repeatedly tell the jury rather, that I failed the polygraph, even though you're not allowed to tell the jury that. So he allowed him to keep telling the jury that, while prohibiting my lawyer from cross-examining him based on the methods that he used to form his opinion. So those were some of the issues that were in there. I mean, there was 10 issues. Do you want me to lay out all 10? I can do that, but it's, you want me to keep going on the issues?
Yeah, tell me. I
will keep going. Yeah.
I think it's important to
Yes.
understand, like, here you are,
Yeah.
you're innocent, you have all of these things, and we've got, a respected, at that time, now totally respected, but, even at that time, obviously respected judge, and she's looking at all of this information. And so you had 7, I think you listed about 7 of those different things.
Okay, so the remaining issues were the evidence was thrown out. So the victim's bra was entered into evidence, and that correlated to one of the statements in the false confession, where I said that I ripped her bra off. So the jury asked to see the bra. But there's some bras you cannot rip off of the body. And so when they asked to see the bra, that's when the judge told everybody that the bra had been left in the courtroom, and the other victim's clothes had been left in the courtroom over the weekend, and that the janitors thought it was garbage and they threw it out. So that was another issue.
So they threw out the evidence.
Yes.
This is all. So I don't understand can you help me to understand a little bit about the politics behind this? Like, why? I mean, does it make sense to get up? How much benefit is it to get a win on the board? I mean, isn't that what it sounds like these guys are doing? It's just like,
yeah, sure.
To win on the board, they'll throw away the keys on somebody just for a win. But now it's like you've got the DA, the prosecutor, the judge,
right,
and you're innocent. All
right.
for a win?
Yeah, I mean, promotions are based on, win and moving up and getting promotions and getting higher salary, maybe becoming the district attorney having higher political aspirations. It's there are a lot of political considerations. I mean, another issue was that the judge gave the jury the wrong instruction regarding what it meant to be in police custody. The law is that whether a reasonably prudent person, innocent of any crime, would believe that they were free to go. And instead of telling the jury that's what custody meant, the judge told the jury that custody means if the police stopped me on the street with guns drawn and taking me against my will into the police station. And another issue was the judge allowed the jury to visit the crime scene, even though the crime scene no longer looked the same because it was in a different season. So that was and then another issue was that the judge was biased. So there were 10 issues.
Well, the judge was biased, huh? Where do we see that? I'm in Maricopa County. I don't know if you know a little bit about.
I've heard a little bit about Maricopa County and Andrew Thomas and Brnovich and Judge Joe Arpaio, and I've heard a lot about stuff that's
we got a lot going on here with our audit, but I digress. But that's kind of why I really wanted to talk about it, because these judges are put in positions of power and can literally change lives. And we here in Arizona, and right now we've got some judges that can change the lives of the world, really, right now, the way that the audit is going. So, I think it's really important that, we understand that, while there are good judges, there are also bad
judges. Right. I'd like to build off of that for a second. I'd like to explain the terrible judges and judicial rulings that I got during the appeals, right? So everybody
Yes,
knows what
please.
the issues are. Okay.
Please.
So the court ruled that I was not in custody, that I came and gone. I came and was able to come and go freely as I wanted. So they ruled that the statements were voluntary. Then they wrote that there was overwhelming evidence of guilt, which really doesn't make any sense because the DNA didn't match me. Then they got rid of all my other issues in one sentence. They wrote that they had looked at my remaining issues and found them to either be without merit or else not preserved for review. So I lost 5-0 on that. And it was all downhill from there. The re-argument motion was denied in one word, denied. The highest court in New York, the Court of Appeals, declined to give me permission to appeal to them. Then I filed in federal court, and because the court clerk gave my lawyer the wrong information pertaining to the filing procedure, my petition arrived 4 days too late, which DA Pirro's office argued that the court should just rule that I was late without allowing me to without letting the court get to my issues, and that's what the court did. So then we challenged that at the Federal Court of Appeals, and that's when my lawyer argued 3 things about the procedural ruling. She argued that it was not late because of me or my attorney, but by the misinformation by the court clerk. She argued that allowing a ruling like that to continue would cause a miscarriage of justice to continue, and she argued that reversing the procedural ruling would open the door to more sophisticated DNA testing. And once again, the DA's office opposed, and Judge Sotomayor, future U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, she signed off on that lower court decision. She agreed with it, her and her colleague, Judge Rosemary Pooler. My lawyer then moved to argue the case in front of Judge Pooler and Judge Sotomayor, requesting that all the judges on the circuit hear the case, but the re-argument motion was denied. And then the U.S. Supreme Court declined to give me permission to appeal to them. And so now that's 7 appeals. That's 11 years in.
So you're 11 years in jail, in prison, I should say.
Yes.
And it's 15 to life you got.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So I wrote letters for the next 4 years trying to get a lawyer and an investigator to take my case for free. Because, the hope is that if they took it, if they could find some new evidence, then I would have a way back in court. And without that, I was permanently locked out. So I wrote letters for 4 years, rarely getting a response. We did the story on that. And then I went to the parole board because I maintained my innocence instead of expressing remorse and taking responsibility. They denied me parole. They cited nature of the crime, and they said, come back and see us in 2 years. So I wound up doing 1 more year, and then I was exonerated. So the Innocence Project took my case. Again, I mentioned the story a little bit earlier in the segment. Second thing is Pirro left office. And third thing is we got lucky that when we took the crime scene DNA evidence and put it in the data bank, it matched the actual perpetrator, whose DNA was only in the data bank because left free while I was doing time for his crime. He killed a second victim 3.5 years later, who was a school teacher and mother of 2. So on September 22nd, 2006, the conviction was overturned and I was released, and I reported back to court November 2nd, 2006, at which point all the charges were dismissed against me on actual innocence grounds, whereas the actual perpetrator, confronted with the DNA, he confessed, and he was arrested and pled guilty and was sentenced for the crime.
So because these cops, this judge, the attorney that represented you, all did so poorly, ineffectively, another mother,
yes,
was murdered,
yes,
by the person that actually murdered
the victim in my case. The victim in my case.
In your case.
Yes, that's correct. You got it.
So we've got, these guys literally have blood on their hands. And, and here we are. Unfortunately, I believe this kind of stuff is still happening today.
Well, there's no doubt, of course, because all the deficiencies that lead to wrongful convictions in the first place, coerced false confessions, lying informants, misidentification, prosecutorial misconduct, bad lawyering, all of these systemic deficiencies are largely unaddressed by legislation in the states, and it's also unaddressed in federal cases also. So the same way that this happened to me, it can still happen to people now. I think that DNA has kind of lulled us all into a false sense of security. We think that can't happen now because of the DNA and we're so advanced, but all those deficiencies still exist now. And DNA is only available in 5 to 12% of all serious felony cases. So most of the cases, DNA is not even an option to get at the truth.
Well, I don't know. All I can tell you is I thank God, that these people have come into, to your life and to be able to expose this right now. So now now you find out, you've got this, you go out, you get this DNA. So then what's next? Then you get released.
Yes, the conviction was overturned and I was released. And then I went back to court about 6 weeks later. And that's when they dismissed all the charges against me on actual innocence grounds. And shortly, at some point after that, the actual perpetrator was then arrested and convicted of the crime.
Here, let me show a picture of you when you were. Oh, hold on. Let me just do this. Share the screen and share. There we go. And there you are, the day you were released. So you were a young man, and here you are, 16 years later.
16 years later, yep, at 32. Yeah, and the picture, that's Barry Scheck to my left. That's my mother, and that's Nina Morrison, my attorney at the Innocence Project.
Well, I just want to say a prayer of thanks to these people who, do this every single day to help, with the injustice, because, we put our trust in attorneys to help us do the right things. And the people who just don't know what they don't know, just like you didn't know what you didn't know. And it caused you 16 years of your life. And
yes.
So, and so I guess, let me just stop and ask you really quick. I mean, how does somebody avoid something like this?
Well, I think well, the most important thing is when the cops want to speak to you, you give them your name and where you live, and then you ask for a lawyer, and you don't stop asking for that lawyer. But the innocence of suspects often works against them, and they don't ask for a lawyer. They think, well, I didn't do anything. What could possibly happen by speaking to the police? And they worry that asking for a lawyer is going to make them look guilty. So I think asking for a lawyer is a really big key. Now, past that, if you do find yourself charged with a crime that you didn't commit, you have to stay on top of your lawyer. What's his theory of the case? How is he going to defend it? What's his strategy? Make sure that he actually speaks to witnesses that he tells you he's going to speak to. I mean, I told my attorney to speak to my alibi witness, and he never did. And he never called him.
So you can. So could you have asked for a different attorney? I mean, okay, so like let's just say there's somebody here, there's a loved one who's, they know that they're free, that they should be free right now. And, they're similar to that situation, or they're in the process of right now and they've got a bad attorney, but they've got a public defender. Is there an option to get a new public defender in that case, or how does that work?
I mean, you can definitely complain. I mean, you have to have specific grounds. He's not meeting with me, or he says he's going to meet with witnesses, and it's been 4 months already now, and he's not doing it. You have to have specific reasons. But if you have those reasons, you can speak up and request it. I mean, it's discretionary on the part of the court, but it is possible. And another thing is that. In one of the cases where we exonerated our client, I mean, one of the things that happened is his trial attorney talked him out of calling his alibi witnesses. His lawyer told him that, you didn't need them. No one's going to believe them anyway. They're related to you.
Not credible, blah, blah,
they're not credible, blah, blah, blah. Listen, a disturbing characteristic in many of these wrongful conviction cases is that lawyers don't call alibis. So if you have alibi, you should call it. And in response to a question that was asked earlier, whether this happens to a lot of people that are fatherless, yes, it definitely does. I was at a disadvantage. So my lawyer would not allow me. I didn't fully understand everything in the courtroom, and my lawyer would not allow an adult to uh, speak with him and me, to explain what was going on in the courtroom and to talk over whether I was going to testify or not. And so that was another thing. And I think if I had had a father figure in my life, he would be able to have attended the court. He might have been a little bit wiser to what was going on, and maybe he could have more, forcefully said, no, listen, he's 60, he's 16, he's 17 years old, and he doesn't understand what's going on, and he wants us to be involved in consulting and making these decisions that his life is attached to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, as I recall, you were saying this good cop kind of
Hmm.
was acting like a father figure to you. You trusted him.
Yes.
You wanted to be a cop. And
Yes.
he was like, okay, come on, son. Here, let's do some investigation. This is really bad. What happened to this girl? Let's work on this together. Is that so? All right, let's go. So now you're released. And tell me what's next.
So I was like everybody who was exonerated. I was released with nothing. New York State does have compensation statute on the books, but you have to file a lawsuit, and that's a process. And it took me 5 years to get anything. So I was released with nothing. So I was always passed over for gainful employment. I was making money doing speaking engagements, and I became a columnist, but speaking is not a consistent form of income, and the newspaper was only a weekly paper, so they only wanted one article a week. So it was, I was always passed over for gainful employment. So I lacked stability of housing. At one point, I was a couple of weeks from being in a homeless shelter, Mercy College, which gave me a scholarship to finish the bachelor's degree. I was 30 credits short of the bachelor's at the time. The funding was cut for college education for prisoners. So they gave me a scholarship, so I was able to avoid the shelter that way. The world was much different than when I was originally in prison. So GPS, internet, cell phones didn't exist before. The culture was different. Cities and towns looked different. So cumulatively, it felt like I was in a parallel universe that I didn't belong in. It's common for people who are wrongfully imprisoned to have psychological after effects of the experience: post-traumatic stress disorder, panic attacks, anxiety, feeling of having been frozen in time. So I was released when I was 32, but I felt like I was 17 because that was the age that I was when I was last free. It was a feeling of processing things at a slower speed as well. It was a stigma attached. I was in. Everyone acknowledged I was in prison for 16 years wrongfully. Yes, but I was there for 16 years. So how much of that rubbed off on me? Was it safe to be alone someplace with me? So that stigma definitely was an obstacle. It was very lonely as well. It was hard to really communicate with anyone who hadn't been incarcerated. So it was a really difficult 5 years. Despite that, I became an individual advocate. I was speaking, I was writing, I was regularly meeting with elected officials, and those things. And I did finish the bachelor's degree with a scholarship, and they let me live on campus, which is how I avoided the shelter. From there, I decided to get an additional credential to help me as an advocate. So I got a master's degree. My thesis was written on wrongful conviction cause and reform. And after about 5 years, I received some financial compensation, and I used some of it to start the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice. So the question was whether any advocacy organizations and/or Christian ministries who tried to help you. The answer is no. I wrote many advocacy organizations and many faith-based organizations, including but not limited to Christian ministries. And of course, my line of reasoning was that maybe there was an investigator or a lawyer that was a parishioner that they could prevail upon to take my case, or maybe they'd be willing to raise the money for me. I mean, I thought their belief in God in whatever form that might take would cause them to be for justice and against injustice, and therefore on my side, and maybe they would raise the money for me that I needed to hire the legal help. But I didn't. None of them answered me.
You know,
But
I
go
was
ahead.
going to say, I wanted
Go
to
ahead.
show this picture as well.
Y- yes, I know what
Let
you're
me
talking
say,
about. Yes.
this, this picture, I think, you know, everybody who's looking at this right now, I want you to understand there are people in prison right now right now in our prisons all over America. This is happening. And when they come out, they are literally giving nothing. And you can just see what the pain on your face, Jeff. I mean, it's there, and there's just a sense of hopelessness. But by the grace of God, look at you today. I can't even tell you how proud I am of you, if I may. I mean, I can't even. It's amazing. But we need to start sticking. We need to be helping out these people that are coming out, of prison, and getting them back on their feet, right? I mean, people that are in prison, maybe they did, do their time, right? And maybe they committed the crime, but at the same time, how are we supposed to get them back on the street? How are we supposed to get them back into the society again, without
We have to.
help? Like, we
Well,
have to
yeah,
help people.
we have to we have to assist them with prisoner reentry, right? We need to bring college back to prison because it's a very serious crime fighting tool. There's a very low recidivism rate for college educated prisoners. And it makes sense because if you're broadening horizons and you're also equipping people with the tools they need to get gainful employment, then that they have a much better chance at getting that gainful employment as opposed to resorting back to their old ways. We do need to help them to re-enter back into society. As a society, we need to stop discriminating against them. I mean, I know a lot of people on parole, and they say, yeah, I went for job interviews and it was going great. And, they wanted to hire me on the spot. And, when they learned I had a record, suddenly, they didn't call me back anymore. But if we're going to discriminate in that way, then again, what do you think is going to happen? And then instead of having a law-abiding, tax-paying citizen paying into the tax base, we're going to instead spend money to incarcerate them again. I mean, I'm not sure what the price is in Arizona, but in New York, it's $72,000 a year to incarcerate somebody. So it really is a lot of money that we're talking about. So after
Right.
about 5 years, I did get compensated. I used some of it to start the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, intending that to be a legacy to continue the policy work that I was doing as an individual, but also help to free people who were wrongfully imprisoned. Also, the same position I was, 'cause I couldn't forget about the men and women that I metaphorically left behind. So like I said, we were able to free 10 people. We helped to pass 3 laws: videotaping interrogation, better identification procedures, DNA database expansion. Then, as part of the bigger coalition group, It Could Happen to You, which Foundation's part of, and I'm an advisory board member of, we were able to pass additional laws. So, oversight, the Commission on Prosecutor Conduct, a tweak of that, discovery reform, which pertains to sharing information by both sides. So, right now, we're working in New York. We're trying to repass the commission. So the prosecutors, you won't be surprised about this. The prosecutors didn't want any independent oversight. So they brought a lawsuit challenging the law. They argued it was unconstitutional. The judge rejected their arguments, but did find a problem in the appeal procedures. So we're trying to repass that now in New York. It's passed in the Assembly. We're close to passing it in the Senate. We're trying to get rid of the exceptions to the law mandating videotaping interrogations. There's a bill that we're supporting which would prohibit the police from using deception in interrogations because that's coercive. There's parole reform as well, where a lot of applicants that can demonstrate rehabilitation are denied parole, just referencing what the charge was, nature of the crime. But, that's something that's never going to change. And really, the parole board should be basing decisions off of whether somebody has been rehabilitated or not. Have they demonstrated that? We have elder parole as well. So we're saying anyone who's 55 that has also served 15 years in prison should be entitled to be considered for release on parole. Now, it's in New York. So in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania is one of 15 states that does not have compensation. So if you've been wrongfully convicted in Pennsylvania, the state thinks that they owe you nothing. So we're trying to pass that. And again, the oversight for the prosecutors. And then in California, we're trying to, again, have the oversight for the prosecutors. And we're also, in light of all of the wrongful convictions a lot of people have been exonerated off of death row. So we are trying to repeal capital punishment in California because of the obvious risk of executing somebody who's innocent. So that's our policy. We have 10 cases that are active now. That's separate from the 10 that we've been able to free. Yeah, prison privatization. I mean, I'm against prison privatization. I think it's simply immoral to make money off of incarcerating somebody. Any business is driven by the bottom line. So what are they going to cut? They're going to cut essential things. I mean, not that the state prisons are really any good either. I think that there's a lot of rural towns that are dependent upon prisons. It brings a lot of some places it's the largest employer. So there's civilian jobs, a lot of correction officers is multi-generational, so there's that aspect of it. I mean, like when there was a big push in New York, some years ago to repeal what was called the Rockefeller drug laws, which is where people were getting 20 and 30 years for possessing a certain amount of drugs. And it was crazy to me because I saw people in prison sentenced under that law, and they had more time than people who killed people and committed acts of violence. But when there was work to try to modify those sentences, the correction officer union, realizing that was going to mean that people who were over sentenced would be getting out, and that less people would be coming to prison for those huge stretches of time, the corrections officers union opposed that. So you can see how, the interplay of politics and making money off the justice system with legislation, how can work and, have really unseemly results.
Wow. Well, I mean, you have just done an amazing, amazing job, to bring, justice and exoneration and change these laws. And, I absolutely appreciate all that you are doing for your community, for this state, and really for the world by exposing your story and my goodness, your diligence to just keep moving forward and not letting this go. What happened to the policemen, the attorneys, the judge? Can you tell me what happened to them once they got you were exonerated? Anything?
No, nothing happened. The lieutenant who oversaw everything, he became the police chief based partly on my case. And after I was exonerated, they stayed with him as the police chief for another 6 or 7 years. Nothing happened to anybody. So the most that happened was there was a couple of indirect fallout. So the medical examiner brought the lawsuit against the county that he worked for his fraud. He suddenly retired. And then the 2 weeks before I came out, the prosecutor suddenly resigned and ran to Florida. But those were all indirect consequences. So nobody was ever held to account criminally. None of them ever paid for it financially. It was the entities that they worked for that ultimately paid it. And I never got an apology from anybody who was directly involved in the case. I got symbolic apology from the prosecutor and the judge, but the judge was not his counterpart that presided over my trial. The prosecutor was not the one who prosecuted me in the courtroom. The district attorney was not the one under whose watch I was convicted, or that the conviction was preserved. So that's one of the things that really does bother me. It really does bother me that Judge Sotomayor was never held to account for her role in, signing off on a decision whereby the fact that somebody's lawyer files paperwork 4 days late, that's what's going to decide the outcome, not the facts or legal arguments. I have yet to hear Judge Sotomayor apologize. I have yet to hear her disavow that decision or to say, look, that was a mistake. I was wrong. I would never, ever make that decision again. And that's really, frankly, this is one of the things that really disappointed me back in, I want to say 2009, politically. Okay, because that was when Judge Sotomayor was nominated to the bench. I was in touch with the Democrats, and all they were interested in doing was supporting her nomination because the nomination had come from a president of their party, Obama, and Judge Sotomayor was Latina, and all that was all anyone looked at. And on the
Yeah. The
Republican and
politics of justice. That's
sure,
why I called it this. This is the
yes,
politics of justice. And here
and
we are again.
and
It's
right,
all politics. All
sure,
politics.
and on the Republican end of it, I was in contact with Senate Republicans, and I knew that they didn't want Judge Sotomayor to be confirmed, so I was in touch with them, and I sent them the legal decisions with her name on it, and I never got responses back from them. I wanted to testify at the Senate confirmation hearing and explain the implications of her decision in my life and more broadly and what would happen to the rights of all Americans. But they didn't want to use the issue, and they both sides kind of let it go, and so that really did disappoint me on that aspect of it. I do want to share that, I have, well, a few things. So criminal justice reform is not a Democratic issue.
Right.
It's a bipartisan issue. I work with Republican state elected officials in my state, and I work with Dems. And, if the opportunity arises and an independent manages to get in office, I would work with them too. So I just want to make clear, I position justice reform, and I believe in my heart that it's a bipartisan issue. So there's that. And the second thing is that it's not, this is about justice and accuracy. It's not anti-law enforcement or anti-prosecutor. It is against prosecutors and cops and judges and defense lawyers who don't do their job in a lawful way, who don't do it in an ethical way. It is against them for sure. It is not a few bad apples. All right. That rhetoric is false. So there wouldn't be 2,775 exonerations. We wouldn't see the brutality, unjustifiable deadly police force. So it's not a few bad apples, but they're not all bad either. There's plenty of noble people in those essential professions. So
Well, I know of
mention that.
I know of some
Yeah,
good lawyers, and of course I know of good police officers. And
yeah,
I praise them, for putting their lives, the police especially, for putting their lives on the line every single day for us. This is not, it's not it's sometimes a very thankless job, and I don't claim to understand the pressure that they're under to get a conviction like that, but that type of mindset needs to stop. And so this is why I brought your story to the world today, is because we just need to make awareness, because truth, and the truth will set us free, right? And so it's not that we're not aware of this, because we kind of are, right, innately, but when you hear it and you see it, you live it, you breathe it, you're talking to anybody, it's not just a story. You lived this, Jeff, and you were. It was tragic, and you've triumphed, and now you have saved lives. We have to continue to bring this to the forefront. We need to. We have corruption in just every branch of government, really, at this point, and with all of the three-letter word agencies, all of them. It's kind of everywhere, and in America. It's the truth. So I'm not saying anything anti-cop, and I'm not saying anything. We literally have this through. It's good versus evil. It's money, it's power, it's all of these things, and it's infiltrated our systems. And so it's up to we, the people, to continue to bring this fight forward, to continue to fight back, to continue to expose this, to continue to fight for our rights, and work with organizations, like Jeffrey's here, to find out more. Maybe reach out to Jeff directly, through this Deskovic.org organization. And if you need help in your state, you want to find out. I'm assuming they can just reach you, Jeff, and then you would help them get started in their state.
yes.
Because obviously, thank you.
Yeah, I would definitely help guide them along for sure. And look, through the website, there is a web form that people can email me. I definitely would answer. And we need a lot of people doing, reform work, because I see this wrongful conviction and general criminal justice reform as a countrywide problem, and really a worldwide problem. And, my ultimate dream is to have an office in each state and ultimately in each country. because I see this as a worldwide problem. So we need people, many people helping, doing everything that they can.
Okay, so I'm just going to encourage anybody, this is really touching your heart, to reach out to Jeff. Jeff, is there anything else that you might want to, share that I didn't share today? Yeah, any
Yeah,
final thoughts?
sure. Yeah, definitely. Just that, this happened to me, and it could happen to you. It could happen to your son. It could happen to your daughter. I mean, it really could. So I do want to mention that. And also, I just want to quickly mention that Amazon has a program called the Amazon Smile program. And if you register for a charitable organization, which I would request that people register for the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation, and Amazon will donate a small percentage of your purchase without it increasing the cost to the consumer. So I definitely would ask that. And if people can share the Patreon link, and word of mouth and social media and every other way. Imagine if just 25,000 people were willing to sacrifice $3 to $5 on a recurring monthly basis, we would be able to free more people.
Is this an international, not an international, but is it nationwide? Or are you practicing in New York only? So that
So we're primarily in New York as far as cases, but we also do have a couple of cases in Pennsylvania. But as soon as we can get the public support, we would love to do cases, in other states as well. And policy-wise, we're currently doing policy work in New York, Pennsylvania, and in California. But we would love to expand into 3 additional states and also do something federally, because that's one thing when people talk about wrongful conviction and trying to do policy changes, they're usually not talking about federal cases, but the same deficiencies that lead to wrongful conviction in the state cases do the same thing in the federal cases. So we definitely need to have reform work there. And look, if you're in the audience and you have a platform, I'd love to come on your show. Maybe people have a much bigger social media platform. We would love to be able to get some celebrity spokespeople. I mean, here's the thing, when you see athletes make the transition to discuss politics, here's the one minor thought I'm going to say on this, right? Is that if somebody was serious, like really, really serious, then let's see you let's see you uh, join up with a nonprofit organization that's doing reform work. Let's see you put up some of your own money, some of your own time. Uh, Join up with a nonprofit organization. Let me see that, and that's real. That I can respect, because your money and your time is what you're saying. But if you're not going to do that and you're just going to make empty gestures, that's not somebody who's really committed to the cause.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll talk, and you need action, and you need money. I mean, none of this happens without money. So, is that do you designate Deskovic.org? Is that correct? It's Amazon Smile, or what is it?
Well, on the Amazon Spiral, it would be the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation.
Okay, the Jeffrey.
Yeah, Deskovic.org is the name of the website.
Okay. All right. Let me just spell your name right, Jeffrey.
Maybe some of these corporations, there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money changing hands, being thrown around all over the place. And, sometimes I really wish that organizations, that are working for specific changes that can show results, I really wish that, some of the money would make its way to organizations rather than just places that don't seem to have any legislative goals. It's just a lot of stuff in the street. It reminds me of the whole Occupy Wall Street movement, where it was a lot of energy and a lot of people and a lot of time, and at the end of the day, it all fizzled out and it came to nothing.
Well, you know what? It hasn't come up to nothing with you. You have saved lives. You are continuing to save lives, and we are just really grateful for you today. We are grateful for your triumph. and for you to continue to share your story. And, again, if you're an attorney out there, a paralegal out there, consider, volunteering, right?
Absolutely.
Please,
If I would call on every attorney to consider taking just one case in your lifetime. Do one case pro bono on a wrongful conviction case. You could literally
please.
save somebody's life. And when you go from talking to somebody on the phone or writing letters to you, walking them out of prison, that's the best feeling in the world. God is happy with you that day. Believe me.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And we've got a lot of good attorneys out there, but we just need to, just take action and make that happen, because it's up to us, we the people, to take our country back. And so when we see this happening, like we just saw today in the last hour, on this show, it's happening all over the place. So, attorneys, please be out there, be mindful, report this stuff. Do not stand for it. It's up to us, we the people, to take our country back. And that is one system as well that needs reform. The legislative and the judicial system both need reform. So thank you all. Please like, subscribe, share my post. I appreciate that. I appreciate your support today. I'm going to do I'm doing a daily double today. I am going to be with the professor, David Clemens, today at 6 p.m., 9 p.m. Eastern, and I will be talking about mask mandates, and electoral college, and Maricopa County audit updates, and who else knows, but it should be a great show again tonight. So please join me at 6 o'clock and continue to like, share, and subscribe. Please reach out to, Jeffrey Deskovic. Donate if you can. My goodness, what's $3 or $5 a month? My goodness, it's nothing, right? One less coffee. It's not even a coffee. So, and you'll be helping save a life. Look at one man's life, how many lives he saved. So, it's a ripple effect. So thank you all. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Jeffrey, and God bless you. And God bless America.
Amen. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.